Hi, my name is Jin. Uh, I'm going to talk about spiritual practice and defense mechanism. Uh, this is the topic I studied when just got into the history psychology program, which is quite a long time ago. And I studied this just for a while, and it influenced a lot. I mean, I changed my viewpoint about spirituality and psychology. So, this was a very influential topic for me. And recently, I just bring it up and open the file. I found that I need more research, so I just bring this one to here and show you, and I'm gonna get your feedback and criticism too. Okay, and this is about spiritual practice and defense mechanism. It's about how we use spiritual practice in a wrong way when we have a maladaptive defense mechanism. And if we have a healthy defense mechanism, we going to use spiritual practice in a healthy way. So my point is spiritual practice and spirituality are dependent on our defense mechanism. What kind of defense mechanism we have is a spiritual practice. The nature will be changed, and in other words, spiritual practice alone cannot develop our psychological well-being. Cannot, yes, it's quite controversial because some people think spiritual practice and spirituality can change our whole being, but I think spirituality is dependent on our defense mechanism. So this view is depend on the perspective of Freudian psychology. So that's why I think, I say the spiritual is dependent on defense mechanism. And let me start with my own story, because this research is based on my own experience. So I'm a Buddhist, and I was born to a very serious family, Buddhist family. My great-grandfather was a famous Zen master in Korea, and my uncle was a monk too. And my mother wanted me to be a Buddhist monk. It's strange, And fortunately, I could help it. I could avoid it. I got married as soon as possible. So, but in this atmosphere, family atmosphere, I naturally got interested in Buddhism and Buddhist practice and spirituality. And when I entered into graduate school, I became a serious Buddhist practice, meditation practitioner. I was really serious at the time. I had a dream about getting enlightenment, which is really serious. So I worked very hard, and I practiced very hard, meditation and cultivating myself and my compassion. And I spent most of my summer vacation in Buddhist monastery. So at the time, I thought I was very spiritual, and I thought as well. I thought I could be. I became quite a whole, genuine person by practicing spiritual practice hard. So I thought I could control myself, and I had a lot of love for others, and I can handle anything. I thought, but it was not true. A few years later, I got a lot of psychological problems. I got depression, and I got conflict with my family members, and I found, just in the middle of the conflict, I behaved really immature way. So my brothers were surprised, and I was surprised too, kind of shocked, because I couldn't see, I couldn't believe what kind of person I was. I think this is really totally shocked, and I just kind of confused and frustrated. How can I behave like that? I couldn't handle my emotional problems, issues, and I was awkward in social situations. So at the time, I had this question: do my spiritual practices not work for my psychological well-being? That's my question. And why I can't grow as a genuine human being with my spiritual practice? So I quite desperately looking for the answer, because when I practiced hard, I had some mystical experiences and kind of compassion toward the world, but all of a sudden they are gone. Just I have a lot of agony at the time, so I was totally different person. So I was looking for this, the answer of these questions, and the answer was from Freud. I got in the help of John Wellwood books and his concept of spiritual bypassing. It helped me a lot, and finally I got the answer from Freud. His theory of defense mechanism is the fundamental of my thought of this topic. And before we go further, I'd like to just check the concept of spirituality. Spirituality is really vague. I cannot define it. It's above my ability, I think. It's really big and vague, and some people say it's a journey for self-discovery or something higher power, but I don't like that kind of thing. Just for me, it's a kind of a higher consciousness with love, bliss, and light. Just yes, but it's vague, still vague. But to my relief, the Wikipedia says they don't know either. It's too vague. So just there's one thing clear about spirituality to me is what spirituality is the opposite, the ego-centered state of mind. That's a clear thing to me. But and other things are unclear, still unclear. Spiritual practices are religious or non-religious practice looking for the meaning of a life itself. My spiritual practices consist of this one: community service, spiritual questions, contemplation on sacred texts, keeping a journal, yoga, meditation, prayer, ethical development, challenge, anything else. So, okay, we go to defense mechanisms. This is today's topic. It is a Freudian concept. It's Anna Freud made a list of these defense mechanisms, and later DSM adopted this concept, and they defined as automatic psychological processes that protect an individual against anxiety from the awareness of internal or external threats or stressors. Defense mechanism has our mind. Our mind work in two ways. When we have a threat, our mind first problem solving efforts are increased. One is that. Second one is defense mechanisms are triggered. Defense mechanisms, why it's triggered is our mind always driven to release tension as soon as possible. But our ego works to get the tension out. That is each strategy is a defense mechanism. So defense mechanism we have. Every person has defense mechanism according to Freudian theory. Everyone has defense mechanism, and from birth to death, we have a defense mechanism. So we cannot get rid of defense mechanism according to this theory. Just let me read some most basic assumptions of the defense mechanism. Most defenses develop very early life. Infants unconsciously adopt the defenses whenever mutually missing in their interactions with their caregivers. And skip the line. And because the defense is learned so early, when the nervous system was still developing, it's not easy to recognize, and it is not easy to let go of it once we do see it. Types of defense mechanism, but there are 4 different categories. First one is psychotic. Psychotic is people who have pathological people use this one. It's a maladaptive state of mind. It's delusional projection, denial, distortion, and splitting. Yes. We know that this denial is a very common thing we do, and immature defense mechanism is used by children. Because they have no power in society, so they all the time passive way to avoid the tension. So it's acting out, throwing tantrums, idealization, fantasy, passive aggression, projection, and somatization. Neurotic is used by adult people, but it's a short-term advantage. It has a short-term advantage in coping. It causes long-term problems in relationships, because it all the time try to suppress the desire. Examples are displacement, justification, rationalization, regression, repression, withdrawal, undoing. Mature defense mechanisms are usually the most positive and healthy manner of resolving tensions. With this strategy, socially undesirable desires are transformed into more desirable actions. So, altruism, anticipation, sublimation, thought suppression. We have a different way to categorize defense mechanisms, just divided into 2 categories. One is adaptive, the other one is maladaptive. Adaptive defenses safeguard the individual from individual form each individual from anxiety while simultaneously fostering effective coping. Maladaptive defenses also protect the individual from anxiety, but it often at the expense of optimal function. We have to look at what I said. Mind action when we have a threat in two ways. First one, mind try to produce problem-solving effort. Second one is defense mechanism. So when we see this, we can see mind at the same time. One part, our consciousness try to solve the problem, but unconsciously try to avoid the problem. So if we are more conscious, we use adaptive defense mechanism. And we are unconscious, we just automatically use maladaptive defense mechanisms. So to go back to my case, I practice spiritual practice a lot, and I thought I was spiritual, but the result was not good. And I think I analyzed this one with Freudian theory. So I used before I start my spiritual practice, I used the maladaptive defense mechanism. And I used denial, dissociation, compartmentalization, like this one. And when I started spiritual practice, this practice giving me more kind of boost of my maladaptive defense mechanism, just provided me a hiding place. So I could hide from social responsibility and my psychological issues into the spiritual practice. So this is my analysis about that, and I was avoiding the problems and neglecting dealing with my unsolved emotional issues and psychological wounds and undeveloped tasks. So I neglected to deal with it. So that is my analysis, and I'd like to show you more example of how we use, or how some spiritual practitioners use a spiritual practice with a maladaptive defense mechanism. First one, Jess sets his religious goal to attain enlightenment. He develops and cultivates his mind and loving kindness. Jess gradually discriminates the world of bodhisattvas from the world of ordinary people. He ignores the feelings of the concerns that need his attention. This is very similar to my case. And yes, from my experience, when I heard famous Zen master he said, I sacrifice everything. I sacrifice everything in order to get enlightenment. It was really good for me. It sounds so good. I wanted to follow him. Yes. So I misunderstood what he said. So I ignored what I have to take care of. I thought it was a kind of sacrifice everything. So I didn't develop my psychological well-being, and as I'm getting older and I have more responsibilities in my community and in my family. And finally, I found out I could not deal with that kind of responsibilities, and I found out I could not handle psychological problems. So that's how I got a depression, I think. Okay. Next example is Danny. Danny tries to practice non-attachment by dismissing his needs for love. But this only drives the need underground so that it often becomes unconsciously acted out in covert and possibly harmful ways instead. Danny wants to be loved. His desire is for love, but at the same time he's afraid of being dumped. So, in order to avoid this kind of potential threat, Danny chooses spiritual practice. It's a non-attachment practice. That's good for him. I mean, just he can stay away from the threat. But he still has desire in his mind. I mean, the desire to be loved. So this desire acts out, and this kind of thing is easily happen to us when we are some people, they look very indifferent and surreal, and they are, but in their mind they are afraid of being losing love or losing attachment. So this is kind of defense mechanism. And third one is Sue. Sue is a religious woman. She prayed for her alcoholic husband for 20 years. Soon after her husband died, she became worried about her jobless son and began to take care of him and pray for him. Do you think there is something wrong with her? It seems a story of a normal religious person. But if we have more information about her, we can find that she is a codependent person. Codependent person lives through or lives for others, and they ignore their own issues, their own problems. So they just pour their energy to take care of others, and all the time thinking and worrying about others. This is kind of defense mechanism, I think. So we have more examples, but I think just show you this, and 5 minutes. How to use spiritual practice in a healthy way? I mean, it means how to, in other words, how to make our defense mechanism in healthy way. First one, most important thing is a conscious effort. We need a conscious effort to change or to fix our bad habits, I mean defense mechanisms. If we don't have a conscious effort, we cannot change it. That is my conclusion. It's a very easy one, but it's a very important one. And conscious effort with compassion. Compassion means when we look at our problem, I mean, look at me, we all the time to be with compassion. I mean, with this compassion, we can open to inner world, and everything come to us, and we can see everything happening in mind. This is like a loving mother take care of her managed child. And one thing, with compassion, we can prevent our superego working. Superego, sometimes when we look at or being observed, or conscious of our mind, sometimes superego bothers. And it's stupid, go away like that. And second one is using spiritual practice as a tool for growing up and healing. It means do spiritual practice for psychological healing and growing up. Withdraw your energy from yearning for higher power or higher consciousness, but pour it to taking care of your developmental tasks. This is very important for me. This is what I got from my experiential, from my practice. So, and I sometimes recommend it to Gen members to this one. Why this is important is I think spirituality has no intention. Spiritual energy has no intention. It sounds weird, but I think spiritual energy doesn't have any form, intention, so it is drawn to our intention, our own intention. So I think if we have a good intention, spiritual energy is used in a good way. If we don't have bad intention, spiritual energy is used in an unhealthy way. So this is what I'm thinking about that. And just to go back to conscious effort with compassion. The goal is increase the capacity to use mature adaptive defense. And the important thing is monitoring. Monitoring means you have to know, you should know when threat is coming, and you don't avoid, just look at. And if you do better, I think you'll be more aware of the whole process. So pinpoint and the whole process. When the threat comes and you just look at it, don't jump in, don't step back, just look and follow the process, the mind process. And this is really difficult at first, because when you got a threat, your body and mind, try to avoid and run away, but you just look at your consciousness all the time, stay and look at that. I think at first time it's very difficult, but as time goes by, you get used to it and you use less energy on it, and you are not getting tired of it. And second time, when the threat comes, just look. Third time, just look, do not avoid. And finally, you will know the pattern. The pattern your ego developed, how they avoid the tension, how avoid the threat. So getting used to it, and someday in the future you will finally, your consciousness intervene this process, this defense mechanism process, and change the root. So this is what I researched. So I think this influenced a lot, and this changed my viewpoint on Buddhist practice too, and give me many interesting questions too. One of that is, do you think the Buddha Buddha has defense mechanism? Do you think that he got enlightened, and enlightened people are said to be what? A person who look at see the reality as it is. But defense mechanism is in its definition, defense mechanism all the time distort or transform or change the reality little bit or largely or little. So my question is, the Buddha, after his enlightenment, he lived more than 40 years. He used the defense mechanism. You think defense mechanism, everyone has defense mechanism. The Buddha has defense mechanism. If he had defense mechanism, it means that he distorted the reality. But if he didn't have a defense mechanism, it means he didn't use the language or social activity with people. Because defense mechanism is created by our language and social activity. So that is a kind of interesting question for me. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
We don't really have time for questions. We take a couple of minutes and prepare for the next presenter.
Okay, thank you.